Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today at our very first AIXD Meetup, especially during these difficult times. Really appreciate you being here. I'm Thomas Hessel. I'm a product designer in London, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Marie, Dan, Justin, and Maksud, whom you'll meet in a minute. We created this meetup because we wanted to connect with you about the exciting topic of the intersection between design and data. And we're also glad to be hosted today by Quantum Black. And Marie will now tell us a little bit more about them. Marie?
Yeah. Hello. Thanks, Tom. And hello, everyone. Warm welcome from my side as well. I'm Marie. I'm a design director with a background in computer science and music. And about Quantum Black. So Quantum Black is the machine learning and AI center of innovation and excellence of McKinsey. And Quantum Black was born and proven in Formula One a decade ago. And we are a diverse crowd of people from various disciplines such as data science and engineering, product management, business development, and all shades of design, from product, database to service design. We work at the intersection of technology and strategy and design to help our clients use data to make sustainable improvements to their performance. In 2015, Quantum Black became part of McKinsey company, and we have now around 500 colleagues all around the world. We are growing. And today, we are very excited to kick off our meetup series and with a talk that looks at the collaboration between data science and design in the field of advanced analytics. And to learn more about this, we are joined by three dear colleagues from Australia. And we are very thankful that you stayed up late to enchant our lunch breaks in Europe. So thanks, Dan, Justin, and Maksud. Back to you.
Thank you, Marie. Just one final note before we dive in. About halfway through the talk, and again at the very end, we'll be having a Q&A session. So please make sure you make good use of the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as possible. And now with that, on to Justin, Dan, and Maksud to talk about unlocking greater value when data scientists and designers work together. The virtual stage is yours.
Oh. Cool. Let me share my screen. Dan or Maksud, do you want to introduce yourself while I get the sharing screen ready?
Sure, guys. I'm Dan Feldman. I'm a designer from McKinsey & Company, and I specialize in integrating design and analytics as well as kind of product and service design.
Yeah, I'm Maksud. I'm data scientist from Melbourne. I specialize in many things, including optimization and mining and other things, and my particular interest in integrating advanced analytics and design.
Great. And my name's Justin. I consider myself a creative innovator, design leader in crafting future digital experiences. So I play a lot in that space, in a lot of prototyping, and I have a real interest in bringing data science, machine learning, and how design can play an integral part into crafting those future digital experiences. I don't think we'll touch on fun facts, so let's just get straight into it. So, but first I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about and mention that it's customary here in Australia that we sort of acknowledge our customary sort of traditional owners of the land, and because obviously we're broadcasting from Australia into the UK, I'd just like to make an acknowledgement of country. So we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to our elders past, present and emerging. So thank you for that. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about, and I'll hand it back to Dan, unlocking greater value and data scientists and designers can work together.
Thanks, Justin, for the acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands. And thank you all for joining us today. It's great to have you here, and we could do this remotely. Today, we're going to be discussing how to integrate design into advanced analytics projects and use cases. Now, there is definitely a value in integrating analytics into design use cases and projects, but it's a big enough topic that we're going to kind of address that separately. So tonight, what we're going to do is share with you our emerging perspective on why and how design and advanced analytics can work better together, a few of our stories and some lessons learned about our journey so far, and some tips and tricks to help you get started on the journey yourself. But really, why are we doing this now? So it's no real surprise to anybody, I'm sure, that the world is getting increasingly complex. The bar for organizations to stay competitive and deliver value for customers is continuously getting higher. Right? Customer expectations are changing and adapting so rapidly. There's increasing competition from traditional and non-traditional players. And technology can come seemingly out of the blue and completely disrupt your business model. So organizations are turning to design and advanced analytics in order to adapt, stay ahead, and solve some of the biggest and most complex problems.
Yeah, and organisations have invested in building their design and data science team. And if we look at data science for just a minute, most organisations are cultivating a data-driven test and learning culture. And we've seen some of these studies in the area of artificial intelligence and advanced analytics. It has the potential to sort of roughly create around 4.6 trillion in annual value across over 19 industries. And while design sees similar opportunities within organisations as well, and we've spent some time tracking these design practices over 300 organisations across the globe, and found that these organisations also do financially better. In fact, they do 32% higher in revenue compared to people or organisations that don't invest in design within their organisations. So as you can see, they've done a great job on their own, or doing a great job on their own. So why haven't they come together yet? So Dan, I'll hand it back to you to talk a little bit why that is.
Thanks, man. So design and analytics on the surface are quite different. Analytics are highly technical. It includes machine learning, artificial intelligence, and it looks at patterns at scale that are anchored in data. Design, on the other hand, is empathetic. It's creative. It focuses on motivation and mindsets and looks at deep patterns in people's experiences that influence motivation and their environments. But after we've brought these two disciplines together, we've started to think about them more like yin and yang, these seemingly opposite forces that bring balance to each other. Analytics look for patterns in data. Design looks at patterns in humans. Together, they create this whole brain approach, the creative and the analytical, the human and the machine, and combining this deep human insight with the broad analytical validation can deliver great business value. And we're actually seeing that happen as you tightly interweave these two capabilities to solve business problems can lead to between 10 and 30% performance improvement over companies that are keeping them separate. And we have these little tips spread out throughout. So this first one is something you can start doing right away. And you can start actively sharing insights across design and analytics, and you should do it as much as possible, as often as possible. A lot of you work in inside organizations as designers and data scientists or engineers. You're solving similar problems from different angles. So by sharing insights across your customers, your processes, performance, it can help you make much more informed and aligned decisions. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. You have new insights to share, just go on over and share them. Now, a lot of this makes sense logically. Design and analytics have these complementary elements. But more specifically, what design brings when integrating into analytics use cases is often this missing third lens that you need to holistically solve a problem. And when I say third lens, what do I mean? Well, this model may be familiar to some of you, but when we think about solving complex problems, there are essentially three basic elements to it. There's feasibility, can we do it? Viability, can we make money off of it? And desirability, do people want or need us to do it? Right? What we've observed in analytics use cases is that technical feasibility, strong. Business casing, often there. So for viability, but desirability is rarely included. So we figured out that this missing lens was causing some key failure modes that were leading to organizations not fully realizing the value from their analytics investments. Next slide, please. Advanced analytics, folks. Does this sound familiar to you? Anybody have this where you build this perfect model? I mean, like a triumph of data science, a perfect model, but nobody ends up using it and it ends up on a shelf somewhere. Anybody? Virtual hands up. This is the problem. This is what we're talking about. By not integrating the desirability lens, it means that after the model gets built, you run into either people not wanting to use the model, being resistant to using it, or find it too difficult to use it even if they want to. So the impact of all of this great work that happens before gets lost. So we found that actually integrating design into analytics process is really effective at mitigating these two failure modes by designing for adoption from the very start, so that when you finally deliver your model, it's something that people want to use and are delighted to use, and it's easy to use, and it gets the most impact out of analytics. So this was a big unlock for us. This proposition that has a clear problem to solve with value at stake and a clear method for solving it. It gave designers essentially the right to play in analytics. And hopefully this is really helpful for you to increase the amount of collaboration between design and analytics in your organization. This was really helpful for us. Justin, can you give a couple examples of when I like usability barriers that people may see?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try and touch on three here. So I suppose the first one is around workflows. So are they smooth? Do they understand, or do users know where to move to? And, they may move to one from machine to another machine, or one bit of software to another. So, trying to smooth out those workflows. And if they're not smooth, then, how does someone get their job done or actually use the actual service or product? Product or service doesn't match the mental model of the user. They don't understand how it's used. So it's either being designed by a designer with their own mental model in mind, or not taking the mental model of what the research may come out to be. Or it may be a platform and device, so not considered to where the service or product may be used for the user. They may be on a different platform, or they may be on a tablet, but we've designed it for maybe only a mobile or a desktop. So there are a number of things here to think about, and I suppose the best way to think about the platform or device is to think about always best practice to the platform and best practice across web and other sort of web applications. So these are just three, and there's probably a number of more as well, but for our conversation, I think three is good. Let's drop out of this conversation now, or this presentation, and go back to a Q&A, and see if there's any questions that people may have or want to ask. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Justin. That was a really great first half. And I think it sounds like it's time to get the data scientist perspective on this as well. So a question for you, Maksud. Clearly there's a lot of value in the two disciplines working together, but what are some of the problems that you run into practically when trying to get designers and data scientists working together?
Yeah, thanks. Very good question. What I see from my previous projects and observing other clients' projects and so on. So generally, data scientists, they understand how data scientists work. Designers understand generally how designers work. They have two different approaches to problem solving. Data scientists like to do the machine learning and all the mathematical stuff. Not all, but most of data scientists, they skip the desirability part, right? Where you look at, okay, well, how the final product will be used. Only as a data scientist who doesn't care about design, I only care about my final model. Same with somewhat similar problem with designers. They get stuck in their world, and when there's not much communication between designers and data scientists, they tend to kind of go in their own work stream, develop something of their own, and then you kind of get two different things, and then data scientists develop one product, designers develop something else, and there's no communication. So we really need to first understand the problem-solving methodology, I guess terminology, and just start communicating with each other. I think these are the three things that typically see. Depending on the project, there are more, but yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And let's stay with you for a minute. There's another one that sounds really interesting. If you were to give a designer a 3-sentence crash course in data science, what would you tell them?
The crash course. First, understand on a high level what is machine learning and what you want to predict. Second, how do you evaluate it? And then the third one, talk to each other again.
Sounds good. And let's flip that question around maybe. And Dan, Justin, if you were going to give a data scientist a 3-sentence crash course on design, what might that sound like?
Well, I'll kick off with the first one. I think design is usually very highly visual, and we, in my sense here, being a sort of traditional interaction designer, it's very iterative. You know, we're constantly iterating and we're constantly building upon looking at our solutions. So, yeah, highly visual, iterative, and trying to get people involved. Although that sometimes can be the other way to Max's point, where sometimes designers can go off and do their own thing and not bring enough input there. But I'll hand to Dan to see what his thoughts are as well.
Yeah, I think of design as creating the future and then mapping from here to there. So a lot of the big disconnects we have is that the way the designers work is we can get a deep understanding of people and context and ecosystems and influence. And then we say, where do we want to go? And create an image of that future that we want to get to. And then we build from here to there, where I think the biggest disconnect can be, and I'm answering 2 questions at once, but the biggest disconnect can be where there are these incremental steps of solving the problem, and then we figure out what it turns into later in the data science approach, that we have to put those 2 pieces together. So it's design is really that coming up with understanding needs, coming up with a future, and working from here to there.
Okay, thank you. Those are the ones I picked up on. Marie, do we have any further questions?
Thanks, Tom. There was just one flying in. Let me read that out for the panelists. What can you do to encourage teams company-wide to interact and manipulate the data your company generates and build their own insights? Often the people who do not have data science are often the people who do not have data science and analytics backgrounds.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm not 100% sure on the question, so I'm going to answer what it means. So I have 2 answers here. One is you go bottom up and top down. So if it's about encouraging people to use the data that's available, a lot of times the process would look, hey, let's get leadership involved, try to get a mandate, build a team, and then start gathering insights. And that's a valid approach. Top down works, but equally powerful can be bottom up, where you grab like-minded people and just start giving it a go. Take data that you have access to, start generating insights, and try to build that coalition of the willing and create a groundswell around it.
I agree. So it's the most powerful when you just go bottom up, top down, and then you combine somewhere in the middle and get them the gold medal.
Maybe one more question from the audience. Like in the past minute, there were a few coming in, so let's have one more and then save the other ones for later after the talk. So here's a question. Are the other cases where desirability directly conflicts with the goals of data science? For example, when it comes to privacy questions, and how does design address these? That's a very interesting one. Starting with you, Dan, and then get the data science view.
Yeah, this is the trick with live questions. That's a hard one. So I haven't, I think if you scope your project well, if you're solving a business problem, then data science and design should be aligned to working towards the same outcome. They're just two methods towards achieving the goal. Privacy can be a trick, but I think if you're also communicating, and depending if you're solving problems for users, then you should be able to manage that and understanding what privacy means, both from a standards perspective and from a user tolerance perspective. But oftentimes they would be at ends, not so much in that they're not solving the same problem, but in that the two disciplines disagree on how to solve the problem. And that does happen often. And then it's a matter of bringing together your minds on, are we really working towards the same outcome? Who are the users? And are we ensuring that they are going to, users or customers, sorry, depending on what kind of use case it is, are we actually going to deliver on their expectations and needs? And then there's always the business case of, is this the most effective and efficient way to deploy this? So that often can solve the problem from those three angles.
I guess to add to this, there is like the privacy concern. It's like a more of a global constraint for the problem that we're trying to solve. So it's both kind of a constraint for data science part and also the design part. So I guess, again, coming back to the scoping, it's like in the beginning, we need to understand what are those constraints where we need to work in, and then work within these constraints.
I think constraints actually can bring in some great results and solutions as well, right? So, working within constraints can always be so valuable in some sense without actually sort of allowing us to have constraints. But it also comes down to just test with customers, test with the business, test with who your end users are to understand where those constraints could be or where those conflicts could be. So, yeah. Back to you.
I mean, there is an idea that design is creativity with constraints. It's the difference between design and art. So constraints are often a good thing, actually. It's how you can take thinking and refine it to an answer.
Yeah.
Fully agree. Thanks a lot for taking those hard questions. I think we go back to hear the second part of your talk and have more questions after that. Thanks.
Let me try that. Apologize, that must have...
Much better. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Killing it, Justin. Thanks, Ben. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how, right? So we gave a case for why design and analytics are better together. But now let's say you're convinced, the question is, how do you do it? So this is the Quantum Black 5I framework. Many organizations have their own version of it, whether 3Ps or 6Ds. This is ours. So think about this not as the answer, but as a structure which you can think about how design would fit into your process. Right? So to be really clear, design is best suited for analytics use cases where behavior and mindset change in people is critical for delivery. Right? So if you're doing full automation of a mechanized process where there's very little human involvement, design is less valuable. Not to say there isn't a role, because along that end-to-end process, there's still plenty of people who have to be involved to check the machines and match the process, but it has less of a role to play. So those are going to be the types of use cases where we're focusing. Just a quick run through of this process in case people aren't familiar with it. Ideation is the phase where we generate the ideas of use cases. We prioritize which ones we think that have the most business value or desirable outcomes. And then we pick the ones we're going to move forward with. Now, actually, a lot of businesses miss this step. It's a critical step to actually go through that process of prioritization and generating a whole series of ideas. Next, intelligence is where you actually validate the business case. You say, yep, this is really as valuable as we thought it was. And then you define that approach for analytics and model building. So it's that like high level feasibility step. Onto inception is where the model actually gets built. You do that heavy feature engineering and solve those super complex data science problems. Interventions is at this point, all the data science is done, you've solved the problem, but it's not integrated into the organization yet. So this is where you productionize the model and deploy it into the business. Now, independence may not apply to every organization here. We're consultants, so we spend time with our clients, helping them develop the capability to make a model sustainable, and also make sure data scientists can operate and improve and continue to make impact. Interventions, the second to last step, is where we see a lot of organizations fall down because of these two adoption failure modes. So if you move to the next slide, please.
I think we have a tip now. So we have a tip. Yep. And oh, go Dan.
So this tip is really about a difference in mindsets also between designers and data scientists. So design, we often think end-to-end about an experience. Right? So when we look at a process or a use case, we don't just think about that moment where data would integrate. We actually look about things that happen before and things that happen after that really would influence the uptake, the use, and the impact that data and insight can have. So this tip is really about, as a designer, take your data science colleagues along on that customer journey, from understanding their needs and their mindsets through to their end-to-end process, because that actually helps inform a better model. It helps you pick features faster and helps think about context more effectively.
Yeah.
Move on to the next one.
Well, I just probably find a really good example here, Dan, to try and sort of give that some real good meaning around the idea. So if we look at a churn process, for example, and how why do people refinance their loans, and there could be many different examples that are hard to derive from just data alone. It could be a couple who have just been divorced. It could be someone who has wanting to build a pool or swimming pool, and they need a bigger loan, so they went to a competitor. It could even be someone who is not a customer, but a broker, and originated that customer caused the customer to actually churn. So therefore, the broker then actually got apologise, I've lost my notes. He got the commission from the other bank. I apologise. And I suppose once you know these things, you can start coming up with these better features and predictors as part of the model. And then I'll go to the next screen now and talk a little bit about the design toolkit for the AA process. And now we're not talking, I suppose, about creating a new process here, or and so forth. Our design toolkit actually sort of plugs into the current process and helps to really create more value or further value based on the process. Now, this process is very different for everyone. We're going to use the 5 Eyes as an example here tonight. And you'll all, from your different organisations and where you work, will have your own process. But hopefully this helps paint a little bit of a better illustration or example of that. And of course, we're not going to tell you what to do at each step either. It's about you and your team to finding that right methodology, especially from a design point of view, as you'll know what those design methodologies are, designers, for the right time and the right activity to help inform what those right outcomes become. And what type of tools you should use that are going to bring that value to each stage in the process. So what we've provided here is some indicative things that need to happen across those processes. And as designers, I suppose, we use these collaborative toolkits to work super close with our data scientists. But I suppose what myself and Dan probably want to really land here with this is that designers probably have a tendency to go away into the corner or put their headphones on. And I suppose just go away and design a solution on their own and then come back with the data of, look at this magic that I've just created. I think this is going to be the right solution. But it's crucial that hand in hand that data scientists and designers really work together here to form what this solution is based on the problem they're trying to solve. Now, look, if we dive down into Inception for just a moment here, and we look at what they are. And, you know, there's many solutions that we can come up with through prototyping and then test and learn process. We can think about wireframes, we can think about code, pen and paper. It doesn't really matter where those solutions come from at this stage. But as long as you're working together to sort of define what those solutions might be to the problem you're trying to solve. And it comes down to really learning by doing and a real bias toward action together. And I suppose what that does then is starts to create this creative serendipity, and it's the importance of play. I went to a talk recently where it was really about the understanding of taking us back to the future, if that makes sense, but using your hands to play with, building code, creating things, really things that can come out and play. And it really brings out different ideas to what you may be trying to create around for the solution to try and address the problem. So, you know, and then when you get a lot of these, then that starts to help inform and start to sort of prioritize what that solution may be. And then from on there, you can go on and customer test and then bring that back in and then iterate again. Dan, I think we've got a tip on this one, so I'm going to hand it back over to you here.
I think we do have a tip, Justin. Future state experience mapping is something that we in design do a lot. And it's a bit about the point I said earlier. What it does is it helps reimagine a process or an experience, what that will be enhanced by the model. So it brings you into that future where the model exists, and it helps you understand what that world will be like. And it fits both kind of an intelligence and inception, but it brings that future stating out. And it helps everyone really get aligned, both on the value to users that you're delivering, but also clear on that goal and how you're helping those users achieve it along that journey. And what that does for data scientists, it helps cut down the iterations because you've really got a clear goal of what you're all working towards. If we actually leave it here for a quick second, there's a couple points I would really like to be clear that we hit. Because usually when we think about design and analytics, we think about data viz, right? Or building a screen of some sort. Design has a lot more to offer than that, though. So in deploying design end-to-end across the experience, it essentially starts the change management process from day one. So by the time your model is built, it's built for purpose, and people are eager to pick it up and use it because they've been involved in the process, and they know it's simple, usable, and solves a problem for them. And you start to see that impact right away. Not that change management isn't useful. It's an important part of the process. But what this does is it lowers the barriers for change management and gets those requirements down so it's easier for them to do their job. Also, just along each step, design adds a little bit of value. Right? So in ideation, it can increase the quality of the pipeline for use cases. It uncovers new use cases that weren't top of mind. Or by looking at the ecosystem in context of stakeholders, it can come up with new ideas that weren't relevant or problems with ideas that originally come up with. Intelligence, it offers context and insights that can serve as bias or gaps in data. And something like intelligence or inception, it can get down and help generate creative solutions to how to best put the analytics into users' hands other than the kind of standard dashboard or spreadsheet. So Justin, can we move on? Yep, so this is the last bit of detail on how design and analytics work together along this kind of end-to-end process. Now, this is a bit down, but it's useful for people who are going to think about structuring projects or leading and project managing. The first thing that we found is a big unlock for our analytics and data science colleagues is that there are different types of designers. So designers have specialties, kind of like there are different types of data science. You can do descriptive or predictive or prescriptive. Designers come in different forms, and we have a different role to play along this end-to-end process. So I think of design like the focus of a camera. So you can have designers who are very narrowly focused, who are great at building elements of a thing. Think about it as building the chairs in a hotel room, or each element of a web page, the buttons. They spend their whole career on those buttons, making them perfect, right? And then you click the focus the next level up, and then that becomes the people who make the entirety of that things. So that would be product or user experience designers. So that would be not just the chair in the hotel room, but the entire room itself, not just the buttons on the web page, but the entire page. Then you click it up to the next level, and designers, kind of experience or service designers, start to look at the world through how a person experiences something over time. So the example there would be how a person experiences their hotel room across their entire vacation, or how a person uses the web page throughout an entire purchase process. And then the last kind of widest level of focus would be something like a strategy designer, who looks at entire ecosystems and how they interact together. So that would be how a vacation fits into your plans for the year, or how your purchase process fits into your budget or your kind of life planning. It's these kind of bigger picture. And so these different types of design fit in at different ends of this analytics process. So in the earlier stages, where you're still kind of scoping and figuring out what you're building and who you're building it for, these higher order kind of service and experience strategy design works. And as you get down into building, this more detailed version of kind of UI, UX design helps bring that concept to life. Justin, I think we have a tip here, don't we?
We do. We have one more. We'll get a couple more tips, actually. And this one's a little bit about working at different paces. So designers and data scientists or advanced analytics work at different paces. So, for example, data may take quite a long time to arrive for a designer. So data engineers, as they're working through it, and where they're mining for the data and so forth. Designers need to probably go off and complete some designs. At least work out what that looks like from the problem that's being addressed to the solution that they provide. And that may mean working closely with data engineers to make sure that they understand what that data is that will likely arrive in the future. And also recognizing from a design point of view that these things may actually change as well. So there needs to be a little bit of sort of given sway from both data engineers and obviously designers to what would change over the course of time to the solution that they're trying to arrive to. So over to you, Dan, to talk a little bit about a case study that's what's worked before for you.
Yeah, so I'd like to share just a story about how we've brought these two disciplines together to achieve a result. We can go into the next page. So I'm going to tell you a story about an energy company I worked with. And we were dealing with an optimization problem. So the way energy is made at the simplest level is you usually have a fuel source. So think of it like coal or gas or oil that you burn. And that burning is done in a giant metal tube, essentially, with a bunch of pipes that run through it. And each of those pipes have water. And when you burn that material, that takes the water and turns it into steam. And that steam goes through the pipes and runs a turbine. And that's how you get energy. Right? But there's a problem in that burning that kind of fuel, especially a dirtier fuel like coal or some sort of petroleum product, creates a bunch of smoke. And that smoke has particulate in it. And over time, that particulate gets on the pipes. And though that means that the heat doesn't transfer into the pipe as efficiently, and you can't get as much energy for the same amount of fuel, and you start losing money. So they have these things inside that boiler, is what it's called, that they use to clean off the pipes. And they use compressed steam, and it just kind of wipes all that gunk off. But there's a problem, and this is the optimization problem. If you use those cleaners not enough, you don't use those cleaners enough, then you get this picture on my left, which is that hardened rock, because over time it builds up, and then you have to shut down the boiler in order to clean that off. But if you use them too much, you get the picture on the right, which is these pinholes where under the amount of steam pressure that these pipes are under, they turn into these noodles that are fire hoses that whip around inside the boiler and creates all kinds of havoc that cause it to shut down. And shutdowns cost about $5 million a day. So the problem we had to solve was, how do we optimize the use of these cleaners to limit the number of shutdowns and extend the life so that we have more money and more efficiency out of this boiler? Pretty clear analytics problem. But there's a caveat in that there were users at the end of this whole process who had to make the decision about when to fire these cleaners. And there was some history in the organization, previously failed attempts at doing automation. So there was already some resistance to an analytics solution. So this is essentially the perfect time for design to step in and lend a hand. Right? So I went in with my data science colleagues and some designers, and we spent time with the end users, understood the problem. And what came out of it was a couple big unlocks that helped get ahead of some problems that we would have run into that would have made this a major problem in the long run, and likely would have seen no adoption of this outcome. Right? So by getting close to these users and mapping their mental model and the journey that they go on to make this decision of when to use these cleaners, we found actually new data features that were critical for them to trust and to understand how to make a decision, so that they were much more likely to listen to the insights from the model and to use them to make a decision. We also understood the user's unique context, right? So we realized that they were in a room with 20 screens, all with information blaring at them. So there's this high cognitive load already. So the way that we had to surface these analytics had to be done in a way that they could get a quick cut and very clearly see the most critical information and kind of nothing else. And that completely changed how we thought about designing for usability, but also what analytics, what insights we surfaced. And also what it did was it started to build a relationship across the data scientists and these users, right? And it lowered these barriers for adoption by building trust, but also understanding, so that by the time we deployed this model built in this kind of simple, easy to understand way, the users were waiting for it, knew it was coming, and were eager to pick it up and use it because they knew it was better than the way that they used to do things. So we essentially helped mitigate disaster across all of this. Hey, Justin, I think you have some tips to share that will help bring us home.
Yeah, so I suppose let's finish with three takeaway tips, I suppose. So the first one is make time for capability building across disciplines. So understanding each value or value that both a data scientist and a designer can bring to the relationship, reduce those misunderstandings, and actually find more opportunities to add value together. I suppose a recently good example of that is working with a data scientist. We spent time reviewing a model dashboard. It came to me quite late, I suppose, in terms of, when a designer probably could have been brought into it. But what helped the data scientist understand a little bit more about the value that design could bring is that we spoke a little bit about scale, we spoke about typography and contrast, and thinking about white space on the dashboard that helps sort of allow, I suppose, the end user move through that a little more seamlessly, as opposed to a user just looking at it going, I just want to put all of this data on the dashboard. So just taking a little bit of a step back there. But it also helped me as a designer sort of step back and understand a little bit about what the data scientist was going through and how he was designing it. And also giving him some I suppose, help to then bring me in earlier that would have, brought both value to both data science, design, and the client to create much better value and impact for the client. The next one is take time to build relationships with translators. They're valuably important for a designer. And it's not so much about building a relationship just to go and work with someone or a data translator, but take them out for coffee, go for lunch, go and get to know someone really well and build that relationship as opposed to just a working relationship. It will make a much more better working relationship, and I think that there'll be much more value brought to both the client and the working team across disciplines. And I suppose the last one to finish off with was probably, get out of your comfort zone and cross problem solve together. And I know maybe I can't speak to data science specifically, but I can specifically speak to designers, is that sometimes we get a little bit nervous when we're sort of out of our comfort zone and we're not too keen to sort of problem solve when we don't really know what maybe it is. That ambiguity can be really sometimes off-putting. So yeah, jump out of your comfort zone, go together, problem solve together, and it doesn't matter if you don't know where it may go. If you're working and problem solving together, it's a really good outtake to building great valued relationships to a better outcome and impact to both client and team. So that is the talk today. I'll hand it back to both Tom and Marie, and I'll stop sharing our screen. Over to you, Tom and Marie.
So great. Thanks, you both. I love the case study as well. It really kind of drives home every single point that you're making. It's such a great story. And we've got some really good questions coming up as well from the audience. And the first one is, what characteristics does a designer or data scientist need to work better together? And I think maybe an interesting way to do this is if you can answer those questions for each other. So how about Maksud, you can tell us about what makes a great designer to collaborate with, and then we'll have Justin and Dan do the reverse.
All right. So what makes a great designer to work with? Well, first of all is curiosity, I guess, and openness, right? So you want to, you need to appreciate that most of the time they're coming from like different field, and you want to connect them. In order to connect them, it's like you need to actually be curious, both from data scientist perspective and designer perspective. And then the second one is like, you need to be able to co-create these things. So whatever you're creating, whether it's like a model, dashboard, you co-create it. So that data scientists will understand, well, I'm predicting this thing, it will get this number, this is how it will look like in the dashboard. And then from the designer's perspective, the good designer will be, will understand, okay, well, this is what will fit into the dashboard and so on. So this, I guess these two, probably more, but these are the two things I have in mind.
Yeah, Tom, I appreciate the framing, but I think I'm going to ignore it and say that I actually think the same is true across both, and that the two things that are most valuable for any kind of disciplines to work together, I think, are humility and flexibility. So humility in that an understanding that your discipline isn't everything and answers all of the best questions, but there's a lot to learn, a lot of value to get from other perspectives and other capabilities. And flexibility in working effectively and actively to adapt your methods and your approach to other people's and other methods, and actively trying to kind of make it all fit together.
And even add transparency and trust into that as well around, as long as you're transparent with your communications to how you work with others and disciplines, which will start to then bring that trust and cohesion into a multidisciplinary team to really create that magic that solves, really, wicked problems, as we'd like to start to call them now.
Yeah. Thank you all. And love it, Dan, a classic designer questioning the frame of the question.
Well, we got a reputation to uphold.
That's brilliant. Great. Okay. Marie, did you see any more questions you'd like to put to our speakers?
Yes, thanks, Tom. There were a few coming in, and let me start with another question from a designer who asked, so comment first, that it would be good to have familiarity about the terminology as a designer about data science in order to advocate for the users. And the question I think behind this is, how can you as a designer gain this familiarity with data science sphere? Maybe like personal experience, how did you, Dan and Justin, do that?
Dan, I'll hand that to you, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's, I mean, so I have an ethos that I've kind of lived by most of my life, which is influenced by Bruce Lee. So I think about like the Jeet Kune Do approach, right? Is the martial art he invented, which is about learning from everything you can and adapting what works into whatever situation you're in. So it's having a really diverse toolkit available. So I think part of it goes back to the mindset of being curious. But as a designer, our stock in trade is understanding people and their mindsets and the way that they think, and applying that to how you look at solutions. So I would actually say the best thing you can do is start using your design toolkit. Find some data scientists if they're available to you, and do your semi-structured interview, do your ethnographic and naturalistic observation, kind of use your tools to start to learn from them. If you don't have data scientists who are available to you, then it's a matter of taking I think the answer would be, if you're trying to learn anything, it's taking the initiative, find your resources, and have that kind of voracious curiosity about the topic.
Maybe to add to this, if you flip this question from a data scientist perspective, what I did is I actually called Dan and said, Dan, how can I learn this? What courses do I need to study? What books? And what are the kind of the famous people who I need to follow? And he sent me a big list of things, and this is what I do every weekend now. Now it's, yeah, at least last few weekends I was more into
an
this.
Idea of,
yeah,
it says a lot about your social life these days, man.
Yes.
Thanks.
Can go anywhere, so might as well study.
I think since we're with you, Maksud, I have another one about data science models interpretability, and the question is, how do you cope with the interpretability in terms of business constraints? Or in other words, how do you make sure that clients are happy with a solution they might not fully understand?
So I would say creating a model is not like you just create a model and it works. It's a very iterative process. So and the kind of the art of it is just you create the first model and try to understand whether it conforms to all the business I would say constraints and so on. And same with interpretability. Sometimes you just build a black box model, and then it doesn't make sense in the beginning, and then you enhance it. You put additional things, like there are SHAP and LIME and other methods that you can use to interpret this model. Like, if you made this prediction, this is why you made this prediction. This is because of this driver, and so on. So you kind of build it incrementally, and then build it together with the business.
Any adds from Justin or Dan in terms of explainability, helping clients understand what the model does?
It's a tough one, so I'm going to answer it as best as I can. I mean, the nature of the question is, how do you get the business happy with a model they don't fully understand? And that, yes, it has something to do with interpretability, but it also has something to do with your engagement style and how you're connecting with the business throughout the process. Because as you're building the model, if you're engaging with the business effectively, you can be making them understand how the model works to the level of detail so that their comfort is already there by the time you're deploying it. The other thing from a design perspective is if you're really solving effective business problems and putting it in the hands of people in a way that they are excited to use and makes them more effective and efficient, and they can see how it fits into the process, we often see less rejection, because you're not just throwing a complex model over the wall, but you're actually giving a holistic solution to a problem.
Yeah, good point. Constant iteration, constant showing of what's being produced to actually bring them on that journey, right? So always take them on the journey, I think is a really good way to.
And also to add to this, sometimes it also takes education, just a little bit more education, and working with the business and explaining that, okay, we're using this weird metrics and they may not make sense, but in the beginning, but just taking time to help them to understand in a layman's terms what this means, and it just takes time. But like over time, they you either find another metric that you show them, or interpretability method, and so on. So you find, and I guess the key word is here also, co-create something that is optimal in this case.
And I think just to quickly add on that as well, Mixed, is the idea that it may sometimes be slowing your process down or the way you're working, but it can have better long-term value for both client or end user or the stakeholder at bay, because you've taken that time up front to take your time to explain what's about to happen, as opposed to trying to take them on a journey at speed, which sometimes can be sort of also just as disvalued as well, because it's just too much sometimes for people to try and keep up with, you know, your speed of work.
Yeah, and sometimes it actually takes simplification, using instead of very complex state-of-the-art model, you use that and it's a black box model.
Yeah.
You actually need to slow down, you actually need to kind of almost downgrade this model to use a more simple model. A lot of data scientists hate it because it's like, okay, I want to use the latest, greatest, this cool latest paper and so on. But sometimes it takes to like kind of almost downgrade it, but makes it more interpretable, right? And that builds, so like building this helps to build trust with the business.
This is clearly sparking a lot of thoughts here, and on for hours and hours. It's so interesting, but I'm afraid I have to cut you short here. This is all the time we have for today. So just wanted to take a minute to thank you, everyone, Justin, Dan, Maksud, Marie, for joining us today and giving up your time. And thank you, everyone at home, for joining us as well. And we really hope you've enjoyed this meetup and it was informative and practical for you. Just before you go, a few quick reminders. In the next coming days, we will share a recording of this talk on the Quantum Black YouTube channel. And there will also be a series of Medium posts summarizing the core themes of this talk as well. So make sure that you connect with us on social media to be informed about these updates as well as future events. And we'll also send out a very brief survey, and would really ask you to just take 2 minutes to fill that in and help us learn how we can improve these events in the future. So that's everything from us today, and stay safe from everyone at Quantum Black. And thank you so much for joining again, and we hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Marie. Bye-bye.